Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming for this to attend this event. I would like to now tell you about the program concisely. Khalida would like to provide some keynote address. Then we will invite our colleagues from IFPRI to make an overview and to share with us the key achievement about the AIDA tool with a focus on Egypt. And right after that, we will start with a panel discussion, and then we will open the floor for your interaction. Then at around 11:20, we will have closing remarks by Khalida. We have also the Cairo hub connected, and Dina will be acting as a panelist. And we have also colleagues attending the event from on the web, I believe. So we've been also webcasted, and we have people watching right now. Over to you, Khalida.
Thank you, and welcome to this close-up event organized in partnership with a team from IFPRI, and welcome to the participants that are connected from other offices and to our team in the hub in Cairo. We'll be discussing the emerging research finding of our large regional grant on enhancing the impact of policies and rural investment on poverty, food security and employment in the Near East, North Africa, with a specific focus on Egypt. So far, until IFAD 11, Egypt has been the largest borrower in NAN and the 7th borrower in IFAD, hence its importance and the focus on Egypt. Achieving poverty reduction, generating jobs and employments, and enhancing structural change towards high-level value-added activities is essential for both low and middle-income countries. For these countries in the Near East North Africa region, agriculture contributes as much as 11% of the GDP and provides jobs for 19% and 15% of workers in low mic and upper mic respectively. So it shows the importance of agriculture. More impressively in countries of low-income countries like Yemen, for example, where the share of agriculture in employment is 44% and more than half of the population lives in rural area. Also, we have noted, like if I may mention Syria, that the sector of agriculture when facing war and conflict is more resilient to conflict, and we have a very good example on that. So when it comes to rural development and food security, the determination and the choices of the right mix of policies and financial investment is always a hard choice for governments. According to the intended development outcome, governments are called on to allocate their limited public resources to a wide range of competing priorities, and sometimes the choices are not the best. Often a decision must be taken within a complex environment that, in the case of our region, unfortunately, is affected by many challenges: currency fluctuation, price volatility, global market restriction, without forgetting political instability, fragility, conflict, and war, just to mention a few. So our partnership with IFPRI is not new. We had a very good partnership in 2011 when we looked at how conflict through development we can help to decrease vulnerability to conflict. So we are now looking with IFPRI at how to support the governments in making informed decisions and choices and prioritizing public investment through a set of analytical tools that is called AIDA. And let me demystify. AIDA means Agriculture Investment Data Analyzer. Among other things, AIDA can help assess which policies are the most effective to achieve outcomes in terms of GDP growth, job creation, poverty reduction, and nutrition. So this tool can also track the broader economy at regional level, within countries, obviously, and keep tabs on the entire agricultural food system. The good thing is that although this project started before IFAD 11, it's fully aligned with our new business model, putting emphasis on policy dialogue and country-level partnerships. This makes the project particularly relevant for the annual in-house exercise of portfolio stock taking that we are working on this week and will be presented very soon, to assess our role as IFAD in supporting policy processes and capacities. I think this is also a very good example to show that we can link research and development. Very often, I must confess that our grants have been not that successful, but with IFPRI we have made it possible to implement the outcome of the research to our work on the ground, be it at the local level or with the government. So we are building together this online AIDA tool based on a fully fledged public investment data set in the targeted countries. This data set will provide information on the stock of selected physical and financial resources related to agriculture, such as the level of public expenditure by subsector, the amount of physical infrastructure and services currently available and their unit cost, and the share of farmers who have access to each of these type of infrastructures and services. So far, a lot has been done. A training has been conducted for the Egyptian Ministry of Planning to assess the impact of their macroeconomic reforms and the National Development Strategy for 2030, hence helping them to monitor the SDGs. Likewise, the project has developed partnership with national research and statistical institutions like the Tunisian Center for Competitiveness and some publication from some 47 expert articles on the Arab food and nutrition security blog. We will hear more about the project outcome and products from our colleagues and friends from IFPRI. And I forgot to mention that they are our friends, colleagues, but also they are our neighbors. I just come back from Cairo. While we are on the 8th floor, they are on the 16th floor, so they have a better view. One of the outcomes that I would like to mention, and it is very, very important, you know, our main framework for strategic in orientation of operation and investment is the COSOP. And this tool have helped to inform both the COSOP for Egypt, which was approved in 2018, but also the COSOP of Tunisia, which was approved this month. So with that, I would like to conclude, and I hope that I'm sure the event will be enriching. We don't have as many people in the room, but this is the beauty of decentralization. So we don't see them, but I'm sure they can hear us and we will hear them. I turn the floor to you, Clemens, Yumna, and James. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khalida, and also thank you to your team, Karim and Dina and all your excellent team. It's really a pleasure to working with you. So my name is Clemens Breisinger. I'm a senior research fellow at IFPRI, and I'm also heading IFPRI's MENA office in Cairo. And it's really nice to be neighbors also. So we are here today with part of the team, my colleague Yumna, based in Cairo also, and colleague James based in Washington. So we have a team of about 10 people from IFPRI working both from Cairo and from Washington, and then of course a lot of collaborator in our partnering countries. So I can, say more about, exactly how our policy influence works and so on. But I don't want to take too much time right now. I would now like to turn it over to Yumna to explain to you a little bit about the overall project, and then James will give us insights into how the AIDA tool works and some kind of early results and success stories.
Good morning, everyone.
Yumna?
Right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you again for having us. So, as mentioned, we have part of the AIDA team here today, and from us you'll be hearing a little bit more about what the AIDA project is, and it stands for the Agricultural Investment Data Analyzer. From me, you'll get a broader overview of the project, and then James will kind of walk us through the AIDA tool and go into a bit more detail and give us an example from Egypt. Can everybody see the PowerPoint on the... No. Where do we get to see the slide? There we go. Okay. All right. So now we all know that effective design, prioritization, implementation of policies and investments is important for development and evidence-based decision-making. But the challenge is that it requires solid evaluations and planning tools to systematically track both the benefits and the costs of interventions. So building on the previous IFAD, IFPRI, and CGIRPIM project mentioned by Khalida, the Decreasing Vulnerability to Conflict in Arab Countries Through Rural Development project, the AIDA tool, or the AIDA project, develops a set of forward-looking planning and evaluation tools to help improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and the scaling up of rural development policies and projects. So basically, AIDA seeks to address this challenge through developing user-friendly and state-of-the-art economy-wide tools. The AIDA project is a 3-year project from 2017 to 2020. It's funded by IFAD with co-funding from CGIRPIM, and it's implemented by IFPRI and its partners with focus on 4 countries in the MENA region. So Egypt, Tunisia, and 2 others. Okay.
Overall, AIDA has 3
Okay.
objectives.
Overall, AIDA has 3 objectives, and there's 3 components that go in about implementing them. The first objective is identifying workable solutions and design options for how policies and projects can be prioritized, scaled up, and leveraged for achieving the SDGs. And under that first objective, we have the first component, and it's our main component. It involves developing a public investment data set and building social accounting matrices, or the SAMs, which we do in collaboration with our partners in the various countries. And so that includes CAPMAS from Egypt, the Statistical Bureau, as well as UN ESCWA and Ministries of Agriculture and Ministries of Planning in the various countries, as well as the Ministry of Development, Investment and International Cooperation in Tunisia, and the Tunisian Center for Competitiveness and Quantitative Studies. So these developed SAMs feed into a computable general equilibrium model, or CGE model, through which the teams then build online and offline AIDA for each country. James will give you a lot more detail about this in a minute. But this is basically the component that involves the bulk of the work. And then the second objective for AIDA, where you have the component 2 here, is promoting and mainstreaming AIDA and the identified priorities so that they become public goods and integral parts in government and partner strategies and investment programs. So to achieve that second goal, we've got this second component, which focuses on advocacy and policy engagement to promote the use of AIDA and the adoption of investment guidelines developed under this project by governments and international partners. So in addition to doing that through events like today, we also have the Arab Food and Nutrition Security blog on our website, where we have experts contribute to post about every 2 weeks or so. We also have the Arab Spatial tool, which resulted from the previous project and allows for visualization of macro and micro level data concerning food and nutrition security, poverty, and indicators related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we have our third objective, which is building capacity among local partners in the use of AIDA to systematically assess the impacts and prioritize policies and rural investment portfolios. And here we have the third component, and this engages the community of practice. So knowledge on how to update and use the tools for simulation analysis is transferred to relevant partners in the focal countries. And this is done through intensive on-site training workshops. And then we also have our publications under this component. All right. So other complementary tools in addition to the main AIDA tool that James will be talking about, I would invite you to take a look at them at a later stage when you're at a computer. But under component 3, so I'm going to work backwards, we've got our publications, and you can find them on the IFPRI Egypt website. On the left over here, you just have a few pictures from our trainings. If you want a bit more detail on them, you'll find blog posts on our website. Sorry, news posts on our website as well. And then you have, under component 2, this is the Arab Food and Nutrition Security blog, again under the IFPRI Egypt website. And then there's the Arab Spatial Tool. And then finally, this is the star of today. This is the AIDA tool. So I do encourage you to take a look at that, at those outputs of the project. The AIDA tool, you'll be able to do that at a later stage when it's launched, I guess. So with that, I'll hand it over to James, who will show you more about this AIDA tool.
Okay, well, thanks, Yumna. So, yeah, I'm just going to talk about AIDA. I'm going to talk about the tool, and just to give you a sort of a broad overview of where we think the innovations are and why we're putting such emphasis on trying to use this particular tool, is that at the highest level, overarching goal of AIDA is to provide a tool that governments can use on a regular basis to help them prioritize investments so that they can drive inclusive agricultural transformation. So that could be a statement from an IFAD document, right? But it's primarily the goal of any government, right, is to find out the best ways to allocate their resources. It doesn't matter how capable the government is, it doesn't matter which country you're talking about, every government has to make the difficult decision about where to put money and where not to put money. So when you prioritize investments, the absolutely crucial point, and something that's lacking in many of the other impact evaluations that we do in this building and in other places, is that you need to consider not only the impacts, the benefits, but you also need to consider the costs. So it's the cost effectiveness of different interventions that really helps you decide which ones are preferable over others. And the second thing is, when we talk about inclusive agricultural transformation, it's essential that we somehow link our investments, our projects, to those high-level outcome indicators like economic growth, poverty reduction, and so on. I know at IFAD, at some point, I think you were being asked to say, how many poor people are you going to reduce for each of your investments? Very difficult to do. These are challenging, and that also means that we need to think now more broadly as the agricultural field develops. So too do we need to shift away from just looking at the farm to looking at the broader agri-food system, right? And so that also complicates our lives. The good news is we have tools that do exactly this, and the workhorse, the tool of choice in the economist toolkit is what we call economy-wide models. And so, in fact, I would argue, and I'm very biased, that it's the only tool that we have in our toolkit that can tackle these issues of looking at both benefits and costs and the broader impacts of our investments on the broader economy and linking it to those high-level outcomes, the development outcomes. So, just very quickly, what do we mean by economy-wide? Why do we need these very complicated whole economy models? Can't we just get by with an agriculture model? Well, like I said, we're fast moving away from a world which is defined by the farm, even though we're agriculture focused. We know the agri-food system includes traders, aggregators, traders. It includes processors and even food services, the restaurants, the street foods that people are buying. And so when we invest in the farm, we expect all of these knock-on benefits to the rest of the economy. And so it would be unfair on us and unwise for us to only measure the benefits on the farm or with the immediate beneficiary group of our projects. We need to look at all these positive spillover effects that we have on the rest of the economy. We also need to look at trade-offs. And the good news is, using this new tool, AIDA, and using the kind of data that underlies AIDA, we can measure how important the food system is. So we were just saying that agriculture accounts for about 11–12% of Egypt's GDP. Right? But we can use these tools to measure what the value added is, the contribution to GDP of all these food and agriculture related downstream sectors, right? The trade, the processing, etc. And once we add all those components together, you can see in Egypt on the bottom left that actually the whole food system accounts for about 27% of the overall economy. So as agriculture's share of the economy gets smaller, we expect the food system to remain not as important, to decline at a much slower pace. And what you can see in the top right-hand side of this figure here, this is the share of those downstream sectors in the overall food system, right, as countries develop. And what we see is as countries develop, those downstream components become more and more important, right? And we know this is true. We have data now to show that this is the case. And what that means then is that at the very least, if we're going to keep investing in the farm, we need to make sure we've got the right kind of downstream environment to accommodate our investments so that we don't have bottlenecks that hold back the returns to our investments. We may even find that there are investments in the downstream sectors that are actually more beneficial for smallholder farmers than direct investments in farmers themselves. Right? We can use this tool, these economy-wide tools, to get at some of these complex issues. Let's not dwell on this slide, except to tell you that one of the big features of these models is if you're going to do economy-wide analysis, you're going to need a lot of data. And so what we have to do when we build these models is we bring in data from all these different sources. We're effectively like national accountants, and that's often why we work very closely with national accountants, because we consolidate information from all the data sources that are out there, pretty much every single one. And we bring it together into a consistent framework, right, which is consistent with System of National Accounts, a UN standard, right, and we reconcile the data. So, you know, there's a common saying, all models are wrong, but some are useful, right, and I think you can also say that all surveys or all data sets are wrong. Right? And you only really understand the truth when you triangulate, when you put data together. And so this is a key feature of these models, is it forces us to reconcile these different data sets. And this is a key part of the SAM, or the social accounting matrix, that Yumna was talking about. The problem is, and as Clem was saying, we've been doing this for years, and I'm a specialist. This is what I do. Right? I wake up, I do this, and it's what I think about as I go to sleep. Right? So I'm a rare breed, a sorry case. And so the problem we have been running training courses for decades at IFPRI, and we're a global leader in this kind of economy-wide modeling, and we love the fact that there's a lot more demand for this kind of work. The problem is actually the model. It's just too complicated, right? And so we can run these training courses and we can show people the power of these models, but once people get back to their office and they're asked to do 10 other things, and given the fact that they don't have time necessarily to do another advanced degree in a particular methodology, these models that we've trained people to use just never get used, right? And so what we do is we dumb down the analysis behind our policies. But what we really should be doing, and this is the goal of this project, is stepping up. We need to make these models easier to use. And so we started this project with a crazy idea. How can we let people do modeling without a model, right? Without them being a modeler. So right now we have a typical structure like this. You have the user on the one side who uses the model which produces the results, right? What we need to do is we need to change the whole dynamics. We need to take the model out of the equation. And so, and the only way for us to do this, right, is for us to pre-run, pre-solve millions of different scenarios, right? We shock the model with millions of different scenarios, and we create a huge database on what the results are for each one of these different policy choices. And so then all the user has to do is make those choices themselves, design a set of an investment portfolio or a particular investment project. And then when they hit run, we don't actually run the model. What we do is we go and find from the database the simulation and the results that most closely match the choices that the user has made. And the power of computing today means that we can do this online in seconds. We couldn't have done this 10 years ago. So this is why we're very excited. We no longer need someone to actually know how to run a model. What we need them to be able to do is understand how to interpret results, and so we keep doing training programs with the potential users of this model, but we don't have to give them advanced programming skills or anything like that. We can update and maintain these models remotely, and they just become consumers of this information. So we've stepped up by making the front end of this model incredibly easy to use. So now I'm going to very quickly talk about the Egypt's online model, and be assured, this is a full economy-wide model. It is RIAPA, right? You may have heard of RIAPA. We developed it here in this building together with IFAD staff, right? So this is our workhorse CGE model. We don't use a simpler model when IFPRI is doing sort of specific studies for governments. This is the full model that we use. It's a full Egypt database, right? So it's built together with CUPMAS. It's most recent data available, and it is detailed. We have four different subnational regions, shouldn't say three. It's got 8, it divides the economy and each region's economy up into 86 different sectors, and in each of those regions we have 15 different household groups, rural, urban, quintiles, farm and non-farm. And so we're going to use a web-based user interface, and the user can choose how much they want to invest, where they want to invest in the country, how much does each investment cost, how much does it cost to irrigate 1 fadan or 1 hectare of land, right? So this is a cost parameter that they will choose. And then what is the impact of using irrigation on farm productivity? And the key thing here is that it's not just about getting the final answer. It's about seeing how the assumptions you make, if you are very optimistic about how low you can drive investment costs, how does that affect your program outputs? If it turns out that actually the cost of investments are 10, 20% higher, or you're not quite getting back that productivity gain that at the start of the project you bullishly thought you would be able to achieve, how does that scale back your expectations on outputs? And like I said, we've got a very large database in the background. We've got millions, over 2 million scenarios that are sitting online waiting for the user to search through and find the set of results that match for them. So what we're going to do very quickly, and I'm going to jump to the other computer, is I want to show you just how easy it is to use this online tool. And I'll let you know that you're the first people outside of our team to actually see this thing, and it's not quite going live. It won't be formally launched until the end of the year, but it's still and it needs to go through focus groups, etc. But the tool is basically working, and I want to show you that that's the case. Just give me 1 second. So I'm just going to drop out now out of... I'm just going to drop out now out of, drop out now. We're online, right? This is a website which you can now see, and it's very simple. You can run this on your phone, which is absolutely key. You can be sitting in a meeting and you can run these scenarios on your phone as easily as you can run them on the computer. And so let's just very quickly jump to some regional scenarios. So we want to make some investment choices in a particular region. So we go down, it says choose your type of investment. This is a short list at the moment. It's being populated more broadly. So we have for testing, we have a simple set of scenarios. Let's assume, and we know that this is something which the Egypt office is considering, let's assume, say we want to invest in extension services, right? So we're going to invest in extension services. Which region do we want to invest in? Well, let's just focus in on the northwest region of Egypt. So it's not quite at the same high level of regional detail that you use within IFAD, but we have some, which is better than none. So our scenario was that we were going to provide extension services to 20% of farmers. You can see already that's 260,000 farmers. And let's be really bullish, right? Let's assume the best case scenario. Let's assume that the cost of investment, the cost of providing extension advice to one farmer is around £2,000. That's at the lower end of the spectrum. It's currently around about 2,500. And let's assume everything goes right. Let's give ourselves some maximum productivity gains. This is bounded by sort of empirical evidence. So we have default values that are drawn from surveys and other analysis, and we've given you high and low ranges so that you can at least be within realms of a plausible realm. And let's go and look at the model results. So right now, it's up in the cloud, and it's pulling down the results, and that's it. So it's gone and it's searched the online database, found the scenario that most closely matches the choices we've just made on that slide, and it's pulled down the results, right? And so here you can see the total cost of the program is about £500 million Egyptian pounds to achieve that level of outcome. Here's a quick summary of what we've done. We can mix and match. We can target 2 or 3 different regions. We can have different combinations of investments in different regions, right? So we can design an entire investment portfolio rather than just looking at one individual intervention at a time. And then you've got your set of outcomes that we can look at, right? Let's just look at GDP in the interest of time. So we've invested £500 million, and what you can see here, yeah, it's not There we go. You can see that the outcome in terms of total GDP is around about £1 billion. So that's a pretty good return on investment there. That's total GDP. Impact on agriculture is not as large, right? It's around 800 million pounds. So you can see very clearly here the importance of taking an economy-wide approach. If you just looked at the impacts on agriculture, you'd be underestimating all the bigger impacts on the broader agri-food system and on the national economy. Right? And so you can look at percentage changes, employment, etc., through this using this tool. So let me quickly jump back to the PowerPoint slide. Oh, actually, sorry, I have to load it back up here. Right, so that's how easy it is to use the tool, and you can see how quickly it was able to go and search in the web amongst those 2.5 million different scenarios, and it can pull back the results. And you can do this on the fly in real time. And so this is a game changer for people who want the power of CGE modeling, but without having to do an advanced degree. We do have an offline version, and there are cases where it's not just about hard investments on the farm, extension, irrigation, etc. There are some policies that are also important. Policies are far more complicated, right? Market policies like trade reforms or food subsidy reforms. These are far more complicated. And actually, sometimes when we're going to design a real policy, we actually need the detail that only comes from using a fully fledged CGE model, right? Like RIAPA, and using AIDA to do the investment analysis. And so given that we can't completely remove the model from the equation, we've developed a very easy-to-use offline version, which uses Excel to interact with the model and to look at the results, right? So I think everybody is familiar with using Excel, and most of the people we work with in developing countries now have a pretty good command of Excel. So the model is back in the middle between us and the results, but it's very easy to use. And so very quickly we want to talk about a couple of food policies that we've looked at in Egypt. We've looked at the food subsidy programs, which are undergoing reforms. We've looked at the cash transfer program, Takaful and Karama, and what the impact is on the economy. And we've also, these are just examples, right? So we're not meant to be doing comparisons right now between these stories, but we've also looked at land reform. So you can do land reclamation, right? And so we've based this on the government's intended statement about the scale of land reclamation. So we've run these different scenarios, and again, the key here, and we don't need to dwell on any particular result, is that we're looking at both benefits and costs. And that allows us to do benefit-cost analysis, the kind of analysis you do when you're designing projects. We can also encourage governments to do that kind of rigorous empirical analysis when they are assessing their overall portfolio or particular investments in the country or particular policy reforms. And so we can see here, and this is very aggregate, you can see, say, the cash transfer program has a benefit-cost ratio of around about 1, which is not so surprising for a cash transfer program. You're taking money from one group and you're giving it to another. And so if you only looked at the benefits, you would say, oh, this is a wildly successful project because you're looking at around about $11 billion worth of benefit, but we have to factor in the financing implications of this program as well. Now, the fact that your benefit-cost ratio is 1 shouldn't put you off, because the point of the cash transfer program is not to necessarily generate economic growth, it's to target the poor. And what you can see here, the red line is the cash transfer program. These are rates of growth. And so as the program has been rolled out over time, the incomes of the poor on the left-hand side have grown dramatically relative to what they would have been without the cash transfer program. Of course, it is a cash transfer. It's an income effect. We provide income and then we sustain that higher level of income over time. And so we get a big spurt in growth in incomes in the beginning, and that peters off and stays high, but grows at a steady rate over time. And so we can use this offline tool to measure these trade-offs. We can identify already that there are potential trade-offs between growth investments and poverty-focused investments, between impacts on the poor and the non-poor, and also between the short and the long run. And these are fundamental issues as you're designing an investment plan together with a government, right? And so the way forward, and this is the end, just to leave you with the core message. So we've talked about these economy-wide models, and we've put globally, not just IFPRI, we've been investing heavily in making sure there are models in as many places as we can. And most countries today, developed and developing, have some economy-wide model in existence. What Online AIDA does is it puts those models into the hands of everyday people. right? The people who really need the information that those models can provide. And so later on this year, we'll be formally launching the Egypt online AIDA, right? And we're in the process right now, actually, of rolling out to Tunisia and Yemen as well. So the project is moving forward nicely, and we're very excited to sort of get actual hands-on feedback, operational feedback from the governments that we're working with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yumna. Thank you, James, for this really excellent presentation. I would like to add that this tool has already been used by IFAD for the COSOPs. We formulated the COSOPs of Tunisia and Egypt using the RIAPA to select some of the value chains that we need to focus on. I would like also to mention that this is really a tool which has been developed having in mind that IFAD invested in particular regions. So we asked our colleagues in IFRI to allow this tool to be able to downscale it and to be able to measure the impact at certain regions. We've seen the tool, we've seen the capabilities of the tool, and also the policy implication and how this tool can really help policymakers to make informed decisions about where to invest, how much to invest, and also to arbitrate between different scenarios. We've seen the case of Egypt, where we would like to engage with the government and advocate for probably scaling up the cash transfer versus the current food subsidy program. So to shift from the food voucher system towards a cash transfer system, a conditional cash transfer. And we have the data to really corroborate and substantiate our talk with the government. So this is really a useful tool. Now, we would like to move on to a panel discussion to see more concretely how this tool could help us to really improve our policy engagement with government in Egypt, but also in other countries in the region. And I would like to mention also that this has started as an idea with the title of Arab Investment Data Analyzer. And then our team here said this is really a useful tool that can be really used outside of the Arab world that was designed for. And this is a universal tool that can be really replicated in other regions. Hence the shift in the title, and we've rechristened it Agricultural Investment Data Analyzer. So I would like now to move to the panel discussion. Let me start by introducing the panelists. We have Khalida, IFAD Director for Near East North Africa Division. We have Thuraya Triki, Director Sustainable Production Markets and Institution Division, PMI. I have my colleague Dina Salah, Head of the Cairo Hub. She's the grant manager, and she's the person who are most positioned to benefit from the early emerging results of this grant-funded program. Since we have the case of Egypt already ready. Then we have Clemens Brisinger, the IFRI grant manager. He's a senior researcher at IFRI and head of the Cairo office of IFRI. And then James Turlow, senior research fellow at IFRI. Let me kickstart this discussion by probably going back to James and to ask the following question. We've seen the case of Egypt and the type of questions that we can ask and the type of themes or policy themes that decision makers can really arbitrate among them. Can you give us other type of questions, other type of issues in the region that this tool is really useful to address? In other words, how we can harness this tool to address the other development issues, the other policy conundrum that we have in the region in terms of fragility, in terms of post-conflict recovery, all those other issues that the policymakers will be facing.
Well, thanks very much. Actually, the main counterpart we often work with is the Ministry of Planning, whose mandate goes well beyond agriculture. And so often these tools are sitting in a ministry that is really concerned about long-term development strategies and how to promote structural change, structural transformation of the economies. And so for a start, we can use these tools to look at issues that are much broader than, say, just even agricultural development. But I think for our purposes here, one of the real advantages of it is that we can use it to look at both investments, where we already have a lot of tools, and I know you have your own internal processes for evaluating investment projects. But we can also look at the power of policy engagement. So actually working with governments to engage around policy reform and so on. And so we can think about how we can use this tool to bridge the gap, to coordinate between the Ministry of Agriculture, whose focus is on the farm, and say the Ministries of Trade and Industry, who are essential to unlocking those downstream sectors, but who need a way of communicating between each other. So this tool can become a tool for dialogue within the agri-food system between these ministries, whose objectives are sometimes competing. Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe Clemens, you can add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have several types of countries these days in the MENA country, and maybe we can characterize one set of country as being in transition, and another set of country kind of in conflict or recovering from conflict, and of course there are other types of countries. But I think for both the previous, the first two that I mentioned, this tool comes at exactly the right time. The transition countries are really breaking with their past. And here I'm especially thinking about Egypt in terms of how they think about policy making, moving away from a subsidy-based system to a more targeted system, opening many boxes that were never touched before. And so this is a real opportunity where policymakers look for solutions. And James already mentioned the food subsidy reform. This is not just a hypothetical scenario. This is something that the minister is actually planning, and we are presenting to him this kind of results to encourage him to further go down this line. Other examples are agriculture. Ministry of Agriculture is currently thinking of a new strategy. There hasn't been an agricultural strategy update for a long time. And so, again, this kind of tool can really help to make people think through and prioritize. A lot of the agricultural strategies that we see around the world, but also in Egypt, is not really a strategy, because a strategy needs a vision, a mission, and a clear priority setting. These strategies are often wish lists of a lot of stakeholders that sit around the table. Now, in our experience, if you have a tool like AIDA, you can clearly show the trade-offs. And if someone argues, for example, maybe fishery is the most important sector, then we can say, okay, wait a second, look, here, this is how things are being put into perspective. So I think this can really help the policy dialogue and bring it more into an, let's say, evidence-based kind of direction. And from our experience, it can really help to find consensus in rooms and in the development. Now, for conflict countries, obviously, the big question is, what are we doing once the conflict is winding down? What about the reconstruction process? And these are questions that we are already seeing, and we're expecting many more to come in countries like Yemen and Syria and so on. There, and like Khalida rightly said, especially Syria has such a resilient agriculture sector, but that also has huge potential to grow. And there again, now there's an opportunity to start new. Now we can really make big changes there and shape the future of the agriculture sector for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So the changes that we make now are really critical. And again, we believe that this kind of tool can really help this process.
Thank you, Clemens. I do concur with and we really look forward. Now we've seen the case of Egypt, and we really look forward. Now we've seen the case of Egypt and the type of questions that this tool, this economy-wide analysis tool, could address, and how it can really anchor our policy engagement into concrete data and concrete scenarios. I really look forward to using this tool in our engagement in Yemen to also try to arbitrate between different post-recovery scenarios, and also to advocate for rural investment in particular areas. Now I would like to ask my colleague Thoraya. This AIDA is a digital tool, and we've seen today that this tool comes at the heels of another tool, which is the Arab Spatial that we've developed under a previous grant. And so we're seeing really a growing trend about using digital tools for rural development. And we also seeing a change in the ecosystem around rural investments. And IFAD is right now embarking on the formulation of a new strategy, on the ICT for Development strategy. Can you tell us more about the main features of this strategy, its entry point, and how this could really help us to overcome the barrier to the shift to digital agriculture in rural investments?
Thank you very much for this very good and long question, Abdelkarim. First, thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, I was not even aware, and that's the beauty actually of attending this kind of events, is that we get to learn about what the exciting things that our colleagues do. So maybe a few words about the ICT for D strategy that my division, which is Sustain PMI, is working on. By now, I think the importance of ICT as a potential game changer for agricultural rural development is well established. It has been recognized at the highest level, and IFAD is no exception. So we've been at a strategic and corporate level underscoring the importance of ICT to implement our mandate and our vision and deliver on alleviating rural poverty and actually uplifting farmers, eradicating hunger, etc., etc. When we look at the way things have been done at an operational level, this, the strategic commitment did not translate into commensurate action. So our strategic framework recognized the importance of ICT. About 50% of our COSOP mention ICT and the importance to promote ICT. However, when we went through a stock-taking exercise for the strategy, we realized that we did a lot of interesting and good things, including, I think, a very good illustration, this AIDA tool that we are learning about today. But most of the work had limited impact because we mainly worked through grants that have never been scaled up or expanded to other regions. So the intention was to really try to scale up and accelerate, helping us helping use ICT as to deliver on our mandate. So that led IFAD to commit during IFAD 11 to write its first actually ICT for the strategy. What I will be mentioning about the orientation of the strategy entry point is still very early stage. Actually, you said today the first time that people see the website is also the first time that I publicly speak, except the EMC discussion we had to seek guidance about this ICT 4D. So nothing is set in stone. Actually, the purpose of my participation was also to seek feedback about this, our thinking. So when we had to write the strategy, we had to make two important decisions. The first one was the scope. What should be the scope of this strategy? And one of the decisions, or the important decision we made, that we will focus on what we call the ICT 4D and not necessarily ICT. So things like what kind of computer we should buy as staff or network are really out. It's not what we are looking for. So the focus is on two things: how to leverage on ICT to improve the livelihood, the economic and social well-being of small-scale farm and rural populations. And the second one is how to better target, implement monitoring and evaluation activities and general and the data that we gather from our project and our portfolio. So that's the scope. The second thing was the vision. It's something that senior management has challenged us. Okay, so what is the vision? Are we transforming IFAD into like the next Google for agriculture? So looking at our comparative advantage, the way we are set up, the vision through the strategy and the envisaged action is really to help maximize the potential use of ICT to deliver on our impact, to do things better, I'd say bigger, and in a smarter way. So in a nutshell, to achieve this vision, the strategy is proposing two objectives. One is basically to mainstream and systemize the use of ICT in IFAD activities. And there are two action areas that are proposed under this first objective. The first one is to promote the use of ICT, relevant ICT applications, and I emphasize the word relevant, and I will come back to that later, in our projects. The second action area is basically to expand or accelerate the uptake of ICT tools in the design and the monitoring and the management of our projects and portfolio. The second action area is basically reinforcing the first one, because we realize also that, for example, colleagues are very aware and very convinced about the value add of ICT, but they lack the tools, the capacity, actually the systems to be able to mainstream that into their work. So the second objective is basically to create an enabling environment to accelerate this uptake of ICT4D into IFAD activities. And we envisage two action areas. The first one is about building capacity and enhancing ICT4D knowledge management, both at IFAD, because we realize that we need internal capacity, but also at our partners, the governments, the farmers, so that we can make sure that whatever we put in place is actually used and transformed into impact. The second action area is to promote and collaboration and partnership, because we have limited resources and we do not always have comparative advantage. So we want to really promote and work with partners. There are three principles of engagement, and I will stop right after. One of them is the focus on the mission. We want to promote ICT4D that serves our goal, our vision, and our mandate. The second one is selectivity, and also the focus on results and actual use. We do not want to promote ICT for the sake of like saying, yeah, we have this innovation. So we need to be very aware of like cost effectiveness risk. For example, blockchain is now extremely popular. Everybody's talking about blockchain. We need to also keep in mind that blockchain is not an established and proven technology. So sometimes when you advise a government, you need to keep in mind where should be the best investment. Is it in a proven technology to help deliver impact, or you would encourage them to start with something that is not yet proven? The third and the last one is to provide what we call secure data-driven solutions and also evidence-based decisions. Because yes, you deliver good impact through project, but the most interesting impact through good policies and good capacity to deliver to implement these policies. So we will have to deal with issues like the ethics of data use, making sure that the data is good quality and that ICT are used for the good purpose. So that's in a rough tell our thinking and what we are proposing to submit actually to senior management and to our colleagues for internal review, and happy to collect your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Soraya. We will have the opportunity to get feedback from the audience. And I'm really happy to hear that we are thinking about a vision for us to embrace ICT. And it's really becoming an important theme these days. Recently, Khalida and myself made a presentation to the MENA ECA World Bank retreat here in Rome about the digital agriculture and how IFAD can really position itself to use those tools in order to improve our engagement and to maximize our impact. Now, I would like just to turn to Khalida and probably to continue on what Thuraya said, to ask her to zoom in on NAN now. I mean, Thuraya has given us the strategic framework and the vision. I would like now to zoom into NAN and to see to which extent we harnessed ICT and digital solutions to address the whole array of problems that our constituency, the small farmers are facing in the region. If you can address this, Khalida, please.
I want to add thank you, Karim, and thank you, Soraya. I want to add to what you're proposing that it will be good if you collect good practices. We have a lot to offer. So I'm willing to contribute if you want to. So having said that, on the innovation, first of all, I would like to steal some of your words. For sure, we don't want innovation for innovation. There are a lot of buzzwords outside digital agriculture, the blockchain. So let's not be taken to be à la mode and to take innovation for the sake of innovation. This is one thing. We believe also that the digital transformation can provide a solution for some of the most pressing challenges to help our countries to meet SDGs. You mentioned Syria. Clemens, I want to say that we have been working for several years now on a remote georeferencing system that enables us to do from far, to assess situations, to see the evolution of of implementation of our project, or even to assess the damage. We did it for Syria, and we were able to say and to see how much of the irrigation canals were damaged. We also tried to do a financial costing, but we didn't finalize that. So this is one thing. But also, I would like to say that innovation has been pushed very often through our research grants, our regional grants, because we don't have the means to contract academia or private sector. We have been doing it through regional grants. So a few examples, mainly is mobile application. We had an application which is called Harvest in Kyrgyzstan, Sudan and Turkey, and this has enabled the small farmers to decide where to plant, when to plant, and what kind of fertilizers to use, for example. We have done the same in Tunisia, and again through a regional grant, if I remember, Karim, where we have developed a proposal which is called MobiPOS, and this was done to support small-scale young rural retailers, and this has enabled faster payment, lower transaction costs, and more secure payment. So there is impact, because everybody has a phone nowadays, even our partners and targeted clients. In Morocco, this was done differently. It was done in the context of a project. We have a project which is a house, and Stefan, who is here, has visited it. They created an online market platform. For those of you who know, we have in the Muslim world every year celebration, and we sacrifice sheep. So this platform was meant only for the project, but very quickly it was so successful that it went from Marrakesh to Casablanca, Mohammedia, Rabat and Agadir, and in only 1 month we had some 60 registered sheep farmers that were able to sell 6,200 sheep, which means they earn $1.6 million US. So it's a huge impact. So just to conclude that innovation is very important. It has to be demand-driven. It has to be tailored to the context. But I think it is time for us that we work together. And as I said, I reiterate my offer to see what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how we can put it to scale through our research with our partners, but also with ICT and with you. Thank you very much, Karim.
So those digital tools have been developed through grants, but we have examples where those ideas have been really embedded into larger investment projects, and the case of Morocco is an important case. Now let me go back to AIDA itself and ask an end user, a country director who is really working with governments, trying to influence their decisions when it comes to rural investment. And I would like to ask Dina, how useful is this tool, and how she sees us using it more consistently, and what would be the expected results?
Okay,
Dina,
thanks, Karim, and
over
good
to you.
morning, everyone. Okay, thanks, Karim, and good morning, everyone. Actually, we're very excited about this AIDA tool, especially as we're embarking on our next investment program in Egypt. One of the challenges I think IFPRI needs to think about, I would hope for the next time we have a tool that we can just click a button and our designs are ready, you know? So, no, but... No, but seriously, just in the context of Egypt, we have been working in Egypt for the last 40 years, and we have had an investment of about almost 1 billion, with reaching about 7 million people. But over the years, we've innovated, working in Upper Egypt on on-farm irrigation, working on the new lands. And more we are confronted with, we have very successful partnership with our Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, the government of Egypt. But, over time, the government has become increasingly demanding because of what it expects from expensive loans. And this is, I think, a phenomena we face with many of our countries in the middle income category. And also, as Clemens mentioned, we have several, countries in different stages. So selling expensive loans is becoming a challenge for us. And in this particular case, using a tool like AIDA, where we have to convince governments to borrow from us for capacity building, for technical assistance. With such a tool, we can actually demonstrate the benefits of such investments and put that in the forefront of our discourse with government. Another thing is, as also James mentioned, it's a tool for dialogue, not just for us with government, but we also feel it's a tool that government itself can use in its internal discussions. Traditionally, we all know ministries of agriculture are usually the most underfunded and only get usually large proportional allocations during a crisis. So we feel that this tool could also help the Ministry of Agriculture, our partners, to make a convincing case to their budget committees to achieve a fairer share of the pot or the pie, as we say, corresponding to the contribution of agriculture to the economy. We know that in most cases, as we heard before, 27% is a substantive contribution. And I think if we look at also how the job creation dimension and all of this, these are elements that we can use for our discussions and to make, of course, our case and to have a compelling case with evidence to share with our partners. We also heard about the agricultural strategy now in Egypt. As we said, we want to come forward. We are going to be part of the team that is shaping this strategy. And I think if we come up with such, an evidence-based analysis, I think it goes farther than just having anecdotal or stories from our projects. So for us, of course, there are a lot of competing sectors. We know that in our discussions with government, within even agriculture itself, there's a lot of competition, competition from energy sector, competition from irrigation and water. So I think having this AIDA helps us also in the last point I'd like to make in selecting the partners. We usually work with agriculture and irrigation, but maybe we need to also broaden the partnerships that we have internally. We also confronted now as part of our corporate priorities to increase our co-financing, domestic co-financing. So I think this is something we're putting really importance on, and we're really keen. As I said, we're excited about AIDA because as we're now developing our new investment, we're going to test run it, and hopefully with the team, IFPRI team and colleagues, we'll be able to also demonstrate that it has been an effective tool for us. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
I concur with you. I mean, what the Egyptian portfolio and the recently approved COSAP has singled out a strategic objective for policy engagement to address those issues. And I think this tool will be really helpful in that regard. Now, I would like to open the floor for colleagues here and also colleagues online to interact with us and to ask questions and seek clarifications. And then I'll try to direct your questions to colleagues in the panel here.
Karim, we have also a question from Egypt. Karim, we have also a question from Egypt.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm Miriam Fernando, and I've very recently joined IFAD, and will be based in the Cairo hub. But just maybe also from the work that we did previously, so I was working with the investment center, and we were working a lot on national investment plans. So maybe I have just two questions here. One is, I mean, this model is fantastic. So this is really great to use, and I would have loved to have had it when we did, for example, the Rwanda investment plan, where it was this whole issue with CGE modeling, etc. And again, now in Ethiopia recently, we worked on it as well. One question was, the model is there, but in terms of the data that's needed. So I think one is to have the model, but also just wanted to ask how much capacity building is going into, because it's a lot of data that's also needed now that you're doing economy-wide, in terms of feeding this model, and is that capacity within the country? I understand you're working with the statistics departments, but that's one question. And the second one was much more, and it was also what Dina was saying in terms of when we're looking at investments, one is to convince the government, okay, irrigation is there and this is your return, and the other thing is capacity building. What are some of the, so the issue was with Ethiopia was the variables that are needed to shock the system. So it's easier to prove X kilometers of road will result in, so how do you sort of calculate the investments of capacity building, technical assistance, the more softer issues? Is that possible to integrate that into the model itself? Thank you.
Let me go back to Egypt. Do you have a question over there? Let me go back to Egypt. Do you have a question over there?
Thank you, Karim. This is Mohammed. Yes, thank you, Karim. This is Mohammed. I have a question to our IFPRI colleague because this project is supposed to be implemented in three countries: Egypt, Jordan, and Tunisia. It's clear that they have some activities already done for Egypt and Tunisia, but I would like to ask what happened in the case of Jordan. Do we have activities in the pipeline? The project is going to be completed in 2020, in 1 year or less, or a little bit more. And when that is expected. The other question is related, is just to see the reaction of the policy maker for both IFPRI and our Egypt colleague here, because the results of Egypt analysis suggests that the agriculture cross can create new jobs, better jobs, but not more jobs. What was the reaction of the government in such a case, and how can we sell an investment project which can create new job, but not more jobs in a country which there is a youth bulge, there is unemployment, there is huge issues and concerns related to unemployment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Let me take another question and then we can address them. Please, Bettina.
I'm Bettina Prato and I
Thank
work
you.
in the...
So I'm Bettina Prato and I work in the, I think, Global Engagement and Multilateral Relations Division
consider me as one of the
at the moment. So I have two questions. Consider me as one of the users, potential users of the model that understand nothing about modeling. So they may be naive questions. I was interested in the part of the presentation that related to sort of working around investments, not so much the policy choices. So the questions there are the following. Firstly, I mean, doesn't the fact that the users can assume level of impact, sort of they select as part of what they enter into the model, doesn't that, sort of put sort of a question mark on the validity of the overall results, once you put that, these inputs into the model, because this is quite a big assumption. I mean, on what basis, what are the safeguards in the model to, I mean, I understand that you're putting in sort of, a range of, reasonable, experience-tested values, but still it's the user that assumes, sort of what level of impact, direct impact. So, on productivity in the case of extension, the specific intervention is going to have. So how do you work around that in order to
outcomes of the overall exercise? And the second is on the time horizon
to protect the validity of the outcomes of the overall exercise. And the second is on the time horizon for of economy-wide impacts from interventions in the agricultural sector. I saw that with policy choices where you use a full model, you are looking at impacts over time. But for what we saw on the website, when it comes to actually sort of simulating impact, economy-wide impact from investments, then for specific types of investments, that is static in time. Is that accurate, or is that actually, is there something more there that we cannot see? Because obviously, I mean, one would also need to calculate how the impact changes, sort of the distribution of the impact changes over time. Thank you.
Tina, let me give the opportunity to colleague to answer those questions. I think there's the first question about the data-intensive nature of this tool and the soft versus hard investment. Maybe James, you can address this.
Sure. So, well, thanks very much. We work a lot with TCI and have done in both Rwanda and in Ethiopia. And you're right, this is a very data-intensive exercise. And actually, week after next, we go to Rwanda to start a long-term engagement with both the Ministry of Finance, the chief economist, and with the statistical agency, the national accountants. And this is the only way to do it. And it's the same way we work in Ethiopia and in most countries. We build, and in Egypt with CAPMAS, we build a long-term relationship with the statistical agency, and we build their capacity to generate the data we need for these models. And actually, to be honest, if you say social accounting matrix to a national accountant, they know exactly what we're talking about, because these are standard data products that are sort of recommended by the UN, by the SNA. So we have no problem working with agencies to develop the data. There's always concern with these data. I told you how data demanding these systems are, and people say, well, developing countries just don't have the capacity. And certainly in sort of post-conflict countries, data quality is a major concern. But you'd be surprised how capable many of the statistical agencies are. The UN has spent a lot of time and resources in developing capacity and building up the skills of these agencies, and the data they produce is not half as bad as many people make it out to be, right? And so one of the advantages of our approach by triangulating the data is that we can spot where those flaws are, and we can have a discussion directly with the generators of the data, and hopefully in the long term sort of fill those gaps and so on. Yeah, you want me just to stop there on data?
Yeah, you can probably follow up on.
Okay.
I think we've seen that this tool can be also used to assess the extension services, which is a soft investment. And so I don't know whether there is really more, is the tool tilted towards hard investment, more the soft ones, or whether it's not the case?
So so it's a very good question. It's actually one which our nutritionists want us to be able to look at things like food safety standards, right? How do you evaluate an investment in food safety standards? It does get trickier. And so what we do have to do is over time build in better functionality to capture some of these softer investments. And so as the whole research field is pretty, the whole field of international research around agriculture is pretty thin when it comes to the kinds of capacity building and sort of policy capacity skills that we're investing in. As we develop more knowledge, and as we encounter more need, we will build more functionality into this. And this is one of the advantages of this AIDA approach. We can keep building the capacity out without and keep improving the model and updating the data without then having to go to each one of our collaborators and say, look, please upload the latest model. We can just literally do it online, and everybody is working with a more up-to-date version. And so these soft technologies are not something that we're capable of doing right now. The ones you talk about, extension, we're fine. But as we get more information, we will build that in. Yeah.
We've heard from colleagues in Cairo, from Abdelkader, about what are the next steps in terms of rolling. We've heard from colleagues in Cairo, from Abdelkader, about what are the next steps in terms of rolling out this to other countries, and I see the interest because he's managing Yemen. I see Samia managing Iraq. Those are fragile countries in fragile situations. And so what's the plan in rolling out this tool in those contexts? And then what's the reaction of the policymakers? I know that this tool has been presented to the Egyptian Minister of Agriculture. We would like to hear the reaction and how they've assessed it and how they received it.
Okay, before I go to this question, I wanted to highlight an additional benefit, and I think this kind of brings in a lot of your comments to some extent. So the nice thing about this online AIDA tool is that it gives a lot of people the options to look at, different scenarios by themselves. In the past, a lot of international researchers, international organizations went to a country, said, look, this is our result, this is what you have to do. Did that work? Not really. Now we have an interactive tool where we can also say, okay, look, this is just one result, but tell us what do you think? What is your assumption? We can go back even on our mobile phone or at the computer in the meeting and actually take feedback, take opinions from other people into account. So that brings the whole policy dialogue or even, you know, the communication with our partner to a completely different level. They are more on an equal standing now. Whereas in the past, we are the experts, you guys have no clue about the model, this is what we think you should be doing. No. So I think this is like really leapfrogging into a new kind of partnership, a relationship. And of course, you're rightly saying, I mean, you're giving like a pretty advanced racing car or a solid car to someone, and we cannot really control how it's been used. So I would say our partners should have some kind of driver license. They have to have an economics background to some extent to be able to interpret the result. But certainly we cannot take the responsibility of, you know, someone coming up with crazy results and, you know, publicizing them. But I don't actually see this kind of danger in a big way. I really see this as an opportunity of a more kind of equal dialogue and partnership. Now, in terms of Yemen and Syria, it gives us a much better way to interact. Now, in terms of Yemen and Syria, the good news is IFPRI has been working with Yemen and Syria before on CGE modeling. And I think we have, you know, a lot of the partnerships, we have a lot of the connections, the data, both local as well as international, to not start from scratch there, but to implement AIDA in a very efficient and relatively quick way. In the case of Yemen, there is even an ongoing project with the World Bank, who is thinking about, you know, reconstruction plans. They have done the DNA together with the UN, and I'm sure you were also involved, damage and needs assessment. And I think there is really an opportunity and interest from the World Bank and now also from IFAD that we can use this tool to really not only assess the damage, but also to come up with a costing of different reconstruction scenarios. And I could see that we could probably do that in Syria too. For Yemen, I can say all the data is out there. We know it's there. Syria could be more complicated. But coming back to your kind of question, what is the reaction of policymakers? And indeed, one of the maybe at the first glance puzzling results is we create better jobs, but maybe not more jobs. But if we think about it, is it really that puzzling? We are talking about a middle-income country, and we know that in any country during the development process, the number of jobs in agriculture declines and is not going up. So to some extent, this is an expected result, and it can be explained because we are investing in agriculture sector. What are we doing? We are increasing the productivity. And productivity, including labor productivity, means that one person can create more output, or the other way, the output increases with fewer people, or you have the same output with fewer people. So that obviously is job reducing. So we took this as a starting point to talk to the Minister of Agriculture. And that leads to a complete new discussion, no? And that leads to a discussion of, okay, we have the agri-food system. So in our model now, or in the results that we presented, we assume that the productivity of the processing sector stays the same. And so, yes, people migrate from agriculture to the processing sector, but what is needed now is to look to increase the productivity in the processing sector. So how can we do that? And once we increase the productivity in the environment and for the processing sector, then for sure the number of jobs created in the agri-food system will go up and down. It's just an example of how a result can trigger a discussion, and that can lead to new ideas about policy then we can go back. Yeah, what happened if we increase the productivity in the processing sector? Well, number of jobs goes up. Okay, maybe we really need to do something in the processing sector.
Thank you, Clement. Before going back to the floor and taking a couple other questions, maybe just an element of answer to Bettina's question is about we've used some of the IFAD projects to calibrate the model. So the model is not a free-riding model. It's already calibrated. And the results of our projects in the region has been used there to calibrate it and to give the spectrum of where the model can go, etc. So in addition to training people and so they can gain a minimum credential to run the tool, we've calibrated already. So it does also manage the risk of having these far-fetched, solutions or far-fetched, results that cannot really be corroborated by the reality. Let me go back to...
Sorry, Karim, do you mind if I just quickly add to that? Because I think I will be very quick, which is to say, you can make crazy assumptions in these models, but it's transparent. People can see the assumptions that you make. And our colleague who was at TCI, Fernando, can talk about how, often these log frames, these development strategies, identify a set of outcomes that we want to achieve, but there's no assessment on whether these are internally consistent, whether they actually hang together in an internal way. And we can actually assess that. And so, and this is really what I want to make, and it's to speak back to the point that Dina raised, which is, this model is, and clearly we need to work on a digital CPM, right? We'll set to work on that now. But there is no model that's going to give you a definitive answer. And I think this is the key. This model is part of a process. It's supposed to be sitting behind the scenes and helping guide the discussion, as Clemens was saying. And so, we need to be very cautious and educate the users of this model that this is not a final answer, right? It is just a piece of information in a policy process.
I have Naufal. Naufal has asked for the floor. Soraya would like to ask fellow panelists as well. So I have Gabriel. So please be brief. And so we can really wrap up in time.
Thank you very much, Karim, and thank you, colleagues from IFPRI, for the excellent presentation. Very briefly, I have a couple of questions. The first one, we know that NEN, the Arab countries in general, they rely a lot on imported food. Did you capture that in the model, and how does it affect the different modeling and equations that you are using? The second one is maybe from a user perspective. As country directors and CPMs, we are always confronted with this question, which value chain, which sector in particular. So can you dive into the value chain analysis using this tool? Thank you.
First, allow me to congratulate you for selecting the name. You know that AIDA is a woman name in Arabic, and women are. First, allow me to congratulate you for selecting the name. You know that AIDA is a woman name in Arabic, and women are very well known for providing good advice. So, I think on this one we got it right. I'll try to be also very brief. Actually, my first question is linked to what Miriam mentioned. How often do you have to update the data or the model for the results to remain valid? Second, that's because maybe I have a professional disformation, but when I look at the word cost, for me, the word financing clicks. I was wondering whether you made any implicit assumptions or whether you can actually also link it to the financing. What Dina said earlier, if I go to sell a financing to the government, basically the decision to invest is closely linked to the decision how I could finance that. And third, looking at the interface, again, I mean, you showed it very quickly. I was wondering whether there is a way to present the results. Like, if I'm a government, what would be super nice is to say, I want to create 10,000 jobs. We have all these simulation models. Instead of, I can enter the 3-4 parameters you need for the cost of different interventions, but then you tell me, these are like the 4 options, and then I pick the one depending on my capacity and my constraints. Thanks.
Soraya, let me go back to Gabriel.
Thank you very much. Actually, Turaya read my mind. I was about to ask what is the need for updating data. I can briefly build on that and ask colleagues on IFPRI about who has to update the data. Is it only the modelists or IFPRI, or in the near future we can envision governments working together with their national statistic institutions to regularly update the data and get full ownership of this tool? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So basically, we have two major questions. One about the granularity of the tool. Can we really zoom in on certain value chains of interest to design teams and IFAD design teams? And then the model maintenance. So who would like to pick up the first one? About how powerful is the tool and the granularity of the tool to be able to go to the nitty-gritty and to something which might be not economy-wide, but probably more geographically centered.
So it's a great question, and actually, and I have a fantastic answer. So a few years ago when we developed RIAPA, I came here and we did a needs assessment. What is the what are the new questions you're asking, and what kind of tool do you need to answer them? And clearly, what came out is the fact that you've shifted to value chain oriented planning, right? And so one of the things we did when we developed RIAPA is we developed a tool that could say, if you can get growth in these different value chains, what would it mean for employment, GDP, poverty, nutrition, a whole range of outcomes, right? And so we tried to tailor those outcomes to fit the outcomes that you are interested in at IFAD. But that was growth to outcomes. And one of the biggest shortcomings is, well, how much is it going to cost to get that growth, right? How much is it going to cost you to stimulate the development of a particular value chain? And that's the innovation of AIDA. It's a cost-based assessment of investment planning. It gives you the link between costs and outcomes. And that speaks to the financing issue, which is, yes, there's a difference between cost and how you're going to pay for it. And the online version doesn't take financing into account, but actually those scenarios that we were talking about with the subsidy reforms and others, we do look at how you're going to pay for the cash transfer. Is it going to be deficit financing, foreign borrowing with an interest commitment, or a sort of an amortized debt? Is it going to be through higher taxes? Should they be direct or indirect taxes? So we've actually, behind all that analysis, is a far more in-depth and actually far more, is all about financing. And just to be clear, it's the financing choice that will determine the success of that cash transfer program, not the benefits, which we've already seen are positive. So these tools are specifically designed. The very first economy-wide model in the world was designed to look at tax policy, right, about domestic resource mobilization back in the 60s. So this is the tool for tax incidence analysis and financing options. Yeah, thanks. I'll talk to you offline about how to optimize output-driven optimization. That's beyond the discussion here.
Okay, so to the maintenance question, we have two parts of the puzzle. No, the first one is the database, which is mainly the social accounting matrix. And the good news is the social accounting matrix is not only useful for AIDA, but it is kind of a standard data set that every statistical agency should actually produce, and many of them are already doing so. And of course, in the course of the AIDA project, we help to build the capacity, which is often already there, but improve it further to enable statistical agencies to build the SAMs. The good news, there is also some technical innovations. It's becoming much more easy these days to put all this data together, and we expect to further push the frontier. So maybe, as I can tell you, James is a miracle. No, one day there will be a tool, you just hit the button and there will be the SAM. So this, think of it, this kind of project, AIDA project, also is a continuous process where IFPRI started maybe in the 1970s, 80s to work with statistical bureaus. Now, we don't only do the same thing, but we have new ways to build a SAM. They are even better than 5 years ago. In 5 years, it will be even better. So in the end of the day, SAM construction is a big part of the story, and I think it should be with the statistical agency. Now, with the online AIDA tool, I see it more like an app. We don't, all of us, we don't develop apps and we don't maintain them, but we use them. We use WhatsApp, but we have a WhatsApp group and so on. So I don't see every single country to maintain an AIDA online tool. This is more like probably, and we have to talk more about it and we have to think it through. This is more like a centralized system where we provide the country with the technology and they can, maybe dump in the data. But there always has to be like a central app, let's say, administrator, to keep this running realistically. It would not make no sense to have every single country do that. And as Karim said, We foresee a lot of interest from many other countries, so maybe there'll be 50 or 100 countries using this, and then there needs to be some kind of central administration to maintain the infrastructure.
Thank you, Clemens. Absolutely, I can vouch for that. Now we are working with Tunisia on a new project, and there is already a request to link our productive investment to the food safety national program and also the cash transfer, because it's becoming, now our countries in the Arab region are really putting in place cash transfer, conditional cash transfer programs. After the Takaful and Karama in Egypt, there is a new one being put in place in Tunisia, and I see this tool, very useful tool to help us engage into constructive and evidence-based interaction with the governments. With that, we would like to conclude the panel discussion of today. But before that, Khalida has the privilege to make the concluding remarks.
Thank you for
So,
this
le mot de la
privilege.
fin, Khalida.
Le mot de la fin, F-A-I-M, I think, for me. Now, just before concluding, I should thank the team who worked on this. Nerina has been coordinating, but also our colleagues. Karim, thank you very much. I heard that 35 colleagues were online connected, so thank you for being here with us, and thanks to the panelists. I wanted to put maybe some takeaway messages from what I heard. First of all, Donald, Dina, and I, we met the Minister of Investment and International Cooperation, which is a borrower in Egypt, and we saw her in a room where she had screens all over the wall showing how her investment were doing. So my dream would be to have the AIDA on her screen next time I go. We learned that we can do modelization without being a modeler, but also, sorry for Dina, we learned that to do design, we need to do more than pressing a button, so we still need you. We learned that we can link research to development. We have used this tool for the COSOPs, but now Dina will have the privilege to use it for the STAR design for Egypt. This tool will help us to prioritize policies and for us to ensure that our investments are pro-poor and are given highest priority. For the next steps, we look forward to the work in Yemen, which is under reconstruction, hopefully, but also in Jordan, which falls under low-middle-income country, upper-middle-income countries, and with which we are discussing, the creation of jobs, of more jobs and better jobs at the same time. So we are quite ambitious. And what else? I think also we need more dissemination of this tool. It would be good that we have a good strategy of communication. And the main issue for me is the maintenance of the infrastructure. I understand, I'm sure the need will be huge, 50 countries, maybe more, but we need to make sure that this tool that we have invested in remains up and running and valid and valued by all the countries and sustainable. With that, without delaying, thank you very much for being here. Those who are here physically, thanks to all of you, and have a nice day. Merci.